impressed upon my heart for the past few days. As a matter of fact, thinking about what you talk about tonight, a picture of a guy that I know came in mind, and this is a guy that has been leading a lifestyle of promiscuity, and he believes that he's a Christian and he goes to church and he can continue to remain in sin, and anytime he's ready, he will come back to God and ask for forgiveness, and God will forgive him. So as I was thinking through the behavior of this guy, what actually came in my mind was that many people have taken forgiveness for granted because they know that whenever they come before God and ask for forgiveness, He is faithful and merciful and He's forgiven. And so they can do whatever they want to do, knowing that God will forgive them. So whenever they are ready, they will come and ask for forgiveness. But when they knew very well that what they were doing was sinful, they will continue to remain in that act of sinfulness. So what actually came in my mind that I want to talk about tonight is that forgiveness taken for granted. Now, forgiveness has been taken for granted. And what I'm actually talking about is not directed to anybody per se, but I personally did not even want to preach about this, but anytime I thought about talking about something else, the Spirit kept directing me to this particular topic. So forgiveness has been taken for granted, and that's what I want to talk about. So, like I said, many people know that their behavior or actions are sinful, yet they continue to remain in sin. Knowing that they can turn to God anytime for forgiveness, and God will forgive them. And these are the people that have taken forgiveness for granted. So I'll be talking about this in reference to the character of King David. Now we know of King David. In fact, the Bible tells us in 1 Samuel chapter 13, verse 14. And then it is also repeated in Acts chapter 13, verse 22, that David was a man after God's own heart. David was a man after God's own heart. David being a man after God's own heart meant that he was obedient to God, that he was committed to the ways, and demonstrated fidelity to God, to God's law. So he was a righteous man in the sight of God. But then the Bible also makes us understand when we read also in 2 Samuel, when we read in 2 Samuel chapter 11 and chapter 12 thereabout, then we also realize that one of the biblical characters that actually took forgiveness for granted was David.
Yes.
It was David because now when we read in 2 Samuel, specifically in chapter 11, we realize that David plotted evil against a man called Uriah. Uriah was a soldier, and he had a wife called Bathsheba. Now, David was a king, and he woke up one day and was walking on the roof in his palace. And while doing so, he set his eyes on a woman that was taking a shower. And the woman was Bathsheba, and the woman was Uriah's wife. David inquired about this woman and had Joab to go and call this woman for him. Because he was the king, he had authority, he had power. And he used his power and his authority as a king. He used that authority. He took advantage of that authority that he had, and he was able to snatch somebody's wife. He took Bathsheba from the husband, Uriah. David was a man with authority. And with his authority, he took the wife of Bathsheba. Now, what David did was, like as I mentioned, Uriah was a soldier. So making it easy for David to be able to snatch his wife, he pushed Uriah to the wall front. There was a wall. And he pushed Uriah to the wall front with the intention of getting him killed so that he'll be able to have complete access to his wife. And that's what David did. And it came to pass that when Uriah went to the wall, of course, he was at the wall front and he was attacked and he was killed. Uriah was killed. And this was the plan of David. This was the intentions of David, because David wanted to have the wife of this man, Bathsheba. And it came to pass that his plan came exactly as it had been planned. So David, being a man after God's own heart, knew for a fact that it was sinful to kill someone and take his wife. He knew, because he's a man after God's own heart. And being a man after God's own heart is someone who is really sensitive to the things of God. But yet David went ahead and plotted in such a way that he'll be able to kill this man so that he'll be able to have his wife. And it came to pass that David succeeded in killing this man, and this man died, and David took 100% control of his wife Bathsheba. Yes, David knew that it was sinful, but he went ahead and sinned anyway. And after that, he asked for forgiveness, and he was forgiven. He took forgiveness for granted. Now, what I would like to say tonight is repentance does not ensure the removal of sin. Repentance, it does not ensure the removal of sin. David was forgiven, but he also dealt